The studio lights burned hot as the cameras rolled, the energy in the room pulsing like a live wire. Bill O'Reilly leaned forward in his chair, his trademark smirk plastered across his face as he prepared to do what he had done countless times before, corner his guest. His target tonight, Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett. He launched into his usual routine, raising his voice, firing rapid accusations, and interrupting her attempts to answer. The audience leaned in, expecting a clash, maybe even a takedown. But Jasmine Crockett didn't flinch. She folded her hands calmly, waited for O'Reilly to finish, and with a cool, measured tone said, "Bill, you've made 3 points, and all 3 are factually wrong. Let's address them one by one." The studio went quiet. She dissected each claim with precision, citing legal rulings, congressional records, and direct quotes that contradicted his narrative. O'Reilly shifted in his chair, caught off guard by the avalanche of facts. Instead of retreating, he tried to regain control with a sarcastic jab, but Crockett leaned in, locking eyes with him. "Bill," she said firmly, "you're not used to people answering you with the truth instead of noise. But tonight, your audience deserves clarity, not showmanship." The crowd erupted in applause. Viewers watching at home flooded social media. Clips of the moment spread instantly, Crockett holding her ground, turning O'Reilly's attempted ambush into his own embarrassment. Headlines lit up within hours, declaring it a defining showdown. The more O'Reilly tried to recover, the deeper he sank, while Crockett's poise and sharp command of the facts made her the undeniable victor. Bill O'Reilly leaned back in his chair, trying to regain his rhythm after Jasmine Crockett's sharp rebuttal. He forced a laugh, brushing off the tension in the room. "Congresswoman," he said, his tone dripping with condescension, "you sound rehearsed. Are you reading from talking points? Because that's not what the American people want to hear, they want honesty, not prepackaged lines." The audience chuckled nervously, but Crockett didn't waver. She tilted her head slightly, her expression calm but unyielding. "Bill, the difference between us," she replied evenly, "is that I deal with evidence every single day. You deal with entertainment. So if the facts sound rehearsed, it's only because the truth doesn't change no matter how many times you try to spin it." The line hit like a hammer. A ripple of applause broke out, cutting through O'Reilly's attempt to keep control of the room. His smile faltered. He quickly shuffled his papers, searching for another line of attack, but the confidence he had walked in with was slipping. Meanwhile, Crockett leaned forward, her voice steady and clear. "You invited me here, Bill. You wanted to challenge me. But if you thought I was going to sit quietly while you threw baseless accusations, you underestimated me." The audience's applause grew louder. O'Reilly tapped his pen on the desk, visibly irritated. The cameras captured it all, the slight tremor in his jaw, the flicker of frustration in his eyes. The dynamic had shifted, and everyone watching knew it. Bill O'Reilly leaned forward again, his voice rising, desperate to claw back control. "Congresswoman, let's be clear," he thundered, pointing his finger for emphasis. "You represent a failing system, a system drowning in red tape and corruption. And frankly, people like you are part of the problem. Isn't it true that?" But he never got to finish. Jasmine Crockett raised her hand slightly, not in defiance, but with the composure of someone used to being interrupted by men who thought volume equaled authority. "Bill," she cut in smoothly, "you're proving my point for me. You just accused me of being part of a system without a single fact. Let's fix that. Do you have evidence? A document? A case? Or is this another one of your dramatic monologues?" The audience broke into laughter and clapping, and O'Reilly's face flushed red. He stammered, trying to redirect. "The evidence is obvious. Just look at," he trailed off, fumbling as Crockett leaned back, a confident smile tugging at the corner of her lips. "Obvious to who?" she pressed. "Because when I stand in front of my constituents, I bring receipts. I bring legislation, records, votes, and court rulings. You bring outrage. And outrage without facts, Bill, is just noise." The crowd roared. O'Reilly shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his trademark bravado cracking under the weight of Crockett's calm dismantling. The producers behind the cameras exchanged glances. They hadn't expected the guest to flip the narrative so decisively. For the first time, O'Reilly's voice faltered. "Well, maybe your so-called facts aren't what people care about," he muttered, but it was too late. The audience had already decided who was winning. Jasmine Crockett leaned in, her tone steady but razor-sharp. "Bill, you just said people don't care about facts. Let's test that." She flipped through a folder she had brought with her and pulled out a sheet of paper. The audience hushed instantly. "You claimed on this very show 6 months ago," she continued, holding up the document, "that members of Congress like myself never read the bills we vote on. But here's the transcript of your own words during a later interview where you admitted you hadn't read the legislation you were criticizing. So which is it? Do facts matter, or do you just make it up when the cameras are on?" The crowd erupted. Gasps, laughter, and applause filled the studio. O'Reilly's eyes darted to the paper in her hand, then back to the cameras. His confident smirk had vanished, replaced by the tight-lipped expression of a man caught red-handed. "Now hold on," O'Reilly said quickly, his voice cracking just slightly. "That's being taken out of context." "No, Bill," Crockett cut in smoothly, her voice carrying over the noise of the crowd. "That's being taken in context. Your own words. Your own contradiction." The audience was on its feet now, cheering, clapping, chanting her name. Social media would later explode with clips of this very moment, Jasmine Crockett exposing O'Reilly on his own stage, using his own words. And in that instant, the balance of power shifted completely. O'Reilly wasn't the one leading the debate anymore, he was the one scrambling to defend himself. Bill O'Reilly straightened his shoulders, trying to reclaim some of the authority slipping through his fingers. His voice boomed louder than before, though it carried a shaky undertone. "Congresswoman, you're twisting this to score points. My audience knows the truth. They're not fooled by cheap tricks and cherry-picked quotes. They want strength, not lectures from a politician who hides behind paperwork." The crowd responded with a mix of boos and nervous laughter. O'Reilly's attempt at bravado wasn't landing. Jasmine Crockett didn't flinch, she leaned forward, her eyes locked on him like a spotlight cutting through fog. "Bill," she said firmly, her voice clear as a bell, "strength is not yelling louder than the person across from you. Strength is standing by your words, even when someone holds up a mirror. You can shout all you want, but the louder you get, the more people see the cracks." The audience exploded with applause, some even rising to their feet. O'Reilly opened his mouth, but no words came. His usual arsenal, sarcasm, intimidation, interruptions, suddenly seemed empty in the face of Crockett's calm command of the stage. For the first time in years, O'Reilly looked less like the master of the room and more like the one being schooled. The cameras zoomed in, capturing the unease on his face as Crockett, without raising her voice, had dismantled the very foundation of his argument. Bill O'Reilly's jaw tightened. He tapped his pen on the desk, forcing a smirk that didn't quite reach his eyes. "All right, Congresswoman," he said, leaning forward with a gleam of false confidence, "if you're so brilliant with facts, tell me this, why is your party failing to deliver on the promises they made? If you're as effective as you claim, where are the results? Answer that without hiding behind your stack of papers." He leaned back, certain he had cornered her with a "gotcha." The studio grew still. Jasmine Crockett didn't reach for her folder this time. She simply folded her hands on the desk and met O'Reilly's stare. "Results, Bill. Let me remind you. Last year, we passed legislation to lower prescription drug costs. We secured billions for infrastructure, roads, bridges, jobs. And we expanded veterans' benefits. Those are results. You know what your contribution was?" She paused, her tone sharpening. "Standing on the sidelines, yelling into a camera, while others did the work. The audience erupted. Cheers, whistles, and applause thundered across the room. O'Reilly's smirk cracked as the camera caught his lips pressing into a thin line. Crockett leaned in just enough for the microphone to catch her next words, delivered with the precision of a finishing blow. "The difference between us, Bill, is that I fight to solve problems. You fight to stay relevant." The roar from the crowd nearly drowned her out. Clips of that single sentence would dominate headlines before the night was over. Bill O'Reilly's face flushed red as the crowd's cheers echoed around the studio. He slammed his hand on the desk, his voice booming louder than ever. "That's nonsense, Congresswoman. You politicians love to pat yourselves on the back for crumbs while the country burns. Don't come on my show and lecture me about relevance. I've been holding people accountable long before you ever stepped foot in Washington." The audience gasped at his sudden outburst. His tone was no longer sharp, it was raw, desperate. He jabbed his finger toward Crockett, his frustration spilling over. "You're not fooling anyone. You hide behind applause and clever lines, but deep down you know your record is weak." Crockett didn't raise her voice. She sat perfectly still, letting the storm pass, and then delivered her response with the calm weight of someone in total control. "Bill, if I were as irrelevant as you claim, you wouldn't have invited me here tonight. You brought me on this stage because you thought you could humiliate me. But look around, the only person being exposed here is you." The crowd roared, some chanting her name, others laughing at O'Reilly's visible frustration. He tried to cut in, but Crockett kept speaking, her voice cutting through the noise. "Yelling doesn't make you right. It just makes you louder. And tonight, the difference between the two couldn't be clearer." O'Reilly opened his mouth, but the words faltered. The cameras caught his clenched jaw, the vein pulsing in his temple. The image of a man losing control, while his guest sat steady and unshaken, was broadcast live to millions. The studio atmosphere shifted like a tide turning. Bill O'Reilly, red-faced and rattled, shuffled his notes, trying to salvage control. "All right, Congresswoman, enough of the grandstanding," he barked. "This is my show, and we'll do things my way. You don't get to hijack the conversation." But Jasmine Crockett leaned in, her voice calm and commanding. "Bill, you keep calling this your show, but let me remind you, it's the people's airwaves. They tune in because they want the truth, not because they want to watch someone yell over their guests." The audience erupted in applause, louder than before. Some even stood, clapping and cheering as Crockett's words sliced through O'Reilly's attempt to reassert dominance. He blinked in disbelief, unused to losing his own crowd. She pressed on, her tone sharp but controlled. "You asked me here to answer questions, and I've done that with evidence and clarity. But instead of debating, you've turned this into a performance. If anyone's hijacking the conversation, Bill, it's you, by refusing to let facts stand on their own." The applause grew into thunder. Even viewers at home could sense the shift. What was supposed to be O'Reilly's arena had become Crockett's stage. Social media feeds lit up in real time, *, she's taking over the show. *, O'Reilly can't keep up. *, Crockett just owned him on his own turf. O'Reilly sat back, his jaw tight, his eyes darting nervously between Crockett and the cheering audience. The power dynamic was gone. The cameras, the crowd, the energy, all of it now belonged to her. Bill O'Reilly leaned forward again, his tone dripping with bitterness. "Congresswoman, you're awfully confident for someone whose party is falling apart. Maybe instead of lecturing me, you should look at your own failures. Isn't it true your approval ratings are nothing to brag about?" The question was meant as a dagger, a personal jab to rattle her composure. The crowd gasped, waiting for Crockett to falter. But instead, she smiled, almost amused. "Bill," she said evenly, "approval ratings go up and down with the wind. But integrity doesn't. My job isn't to win a popularity contest, it's to deliver results. And the fact that you have to reach for polls instead of policies shows just how thin your argument really is. The audience roared. Some laughed, others clapped, but the reaction was unanimous. Crockett had flipped his attack right back on him. She leaned in just slightly, her voice carrying a sharp edge. If you want to talk about ratings, though, let's be honest, your show's biggest spike in years is happening right now, and it's not because of you. It's because I'm here. The crowd erupted, some on their feet, the chant starting again, Crockett. Crockett. O'Reilly blinked rapidly, his mouth opening but no words coming. The cameras captured the image perfectly, the once dominant host silenced on his own stage, while his guest commanded the room with nothing more than calm precision and truth. Bill O'Reilly's composure finally cracked. His voice shot up several octaves as he slammed his hand on the desk. "This is my show," he shouted, his face flushed crimson. "You don't get to come in here, spin your talking points, and make a fool of me in front of my audience." The crowd gasped. Some laughed, others booed, but everyone could see it, O'Reilly had lost control. The more he yelled, the smaller he seemed. His booming presence had shrunk into something frantic, almost desperate. Jasmine Crockett didn't move a muscle. She waited for the echoes of his outburst to die down, then spoke in a calm, steady tone that sliced through the noise. "Bill, you just admitted it yourself. This isn't about truth. It's not about accountability. It's about you. Your show. Your ego. And the moment someone challenges that, you fall apart." The studio audience exploded into applause, some rising to their feet again. O'Reilly opened his mouth, but the crowd drowned him out. Crockett leaned slightly toward the camera, delivering the line that would echo across headlines within hours. "Power built on shouting is fragile. Power built on truth is unshakable." The eruption from the audience was deafening. Clips of O'Reilly's meltdown paired with Crockett's words would soon dominate every social feed, turning the supposed ambush into a career-defining victory for her. Behind the cameras, producers exchanged panicked looks. This wasn't the fiery, controlled clash they had promised advertisers, this was a meltdown on live television. The stage manager waved frantically, signaling O'Reilly to wrap it up, but he was too consumed by his frustration to notice. Bill O'Reilly leaned across the desk, his voice cracking with strain. "You think you're clever, don't you? You come in here, try to embarrass me on my platform, and you think people will buy it. But they know better. They know I don't back down." The audience groaned. Some booed outright. Others shouted back, "Answer her," and "She's right." It was clear, his grip on the room was gone. Jasmine Crockett, still calm, clasped her hands together and spoke directly to the viewers at home. "Ladies and gentlemen, you've just seen the difference between volume and vision. One shouts to protect his pride. The other works to protect your future. You decide which matters more." The crowd erupted once again, standing and clapping so loudly the studio lights shook. The cameras zoomed in on O'Reilly, his face tight, lips pressed into a hard line. He knew it. Everyone knew it. The narrative had slipped entirely from his hands. Backstage, a producer muttered under his breath, "This isn't his show anymore. It's hers." Bill O'Reilly's desperation finally boiled over. His voice dropped low, dripping with venom as he leaned toward Crockett. "You know what, Congresswoman? You're just another politician who loves the spotlight. You come here, spout rehearsed lines, and bask in the applause like it means something. Deep down, you're nothing more than a performer." The audience groaned audibly. A few even shouted back, "Cheap shot." O'Reilly's insult didn't land, it felt petty, grasping at straws. Jasmine Crockett didn't flinch. Instead, she let a small smile curl at the corner of her lips. She turned toward him, her tone cool and sharp. "Bill, if standing up for facts and refusing to be bullied looks like a performance to you, then maybe the problem isn't me, it's what you've mistaken for journalism all these years. The crowd erupted into laughter and applause, rising to their feet. Crockett pressed on, her voice cutting through the noise. "If I'm performing, Bill, it's only because you turned truth into theater. And tonight? The audience finally got to see who the real actor is." The studio shook with cheers. O'Reilly's face went pale, his pen frozen in his hand. His so-called final insult had detonated in his own lap, leaving Crockett to claim the moment with flawless precision. The studio was electric, every camera locked in, every audience member on their feet, waiting to see what would happen next. Bill O'Reilly sat rigid, gripping his desk as if it were the last anchor keeping him afloat. His eyes darted toward the producers, but they gave him nothing. This was live, and there was no saving edit coming. Jasmine Crockett leaned in, her voice steady, her gaze unwavering. "Bill, you wanted this moment. You invited me here thinking you could humiliate me. But what happened tonight isn't humiliation for me, it's revelation for you." The audience quieted, hanging on her words. She paused just long enough for the silence to feel heavy. Then, with perfect timing, she delivered the blow. "You've built a career shouting at others. But tonight, the only thing you proved is that when the shouting stops, you have nothing left to say." The eruption was deafening. Cheers, applause, chants, Crockett. Crockett. The cameras caught O'Reilly's face, pale, tight-lipped, utterly defeated. His pen slipped from his hand, clattering against the desk, the sound amplified in the stunned silence between audience roars. Crockett leaned back in her chair, calm and collected, as if she'd simply finished a routine day's work. The contrast was devastating, one figure broken under the spotlight, the other shining brighter than ever. The red studio lights blinked, signaling the show was heading into its final minutes. Bill O'Reilly sat stiff in his chair, his usual bluster gone. His jaw was clenched, his eyes fixed on the desk in front of him as the crowd continued chanting Jasmine Crockett's name. The producers frantically waved at him from behind the cameras, urging him to close out the broadcast. Finally, he forced himself to look into the lens, his voice flat and hollow. "That's all the time we have tonight. Thank you for joining us." It was the weakest sign-off of his career, no fire, no swagger, just a man desperate to end the segment. Meanwhile, Jasmine Crockett rose gracefully from her chair. The audience immediately erupted into a standing ovation, the roar so loud it drowned out the music playing over the credits. She smiled, shook a few hands in the front row, and walked off the stage with calm confidence, as though the victory had been hers from the start. Backstage, staff whispered in disbelief. "She owned the show," one producer muttered. Another added, "This clip is going to be everywhere." They were right. By morning, the moment was viral. Headlines blared across every platform, Crockett destroys O'Reilly on his own stage. Clips of her dismantling him spread like wildfire, praised as one of the most decisive takedowns ever aired on live television. Bill O'Reilly had tried to humiliate Jasmine Crockett. But in the end, it was his own pride, his own arrogance, that left him humiliated in front of millions. Crockett didn't just survive the ambush, she flipped it into a career-defining triumph.